Thank you very much, Fiona. So we're going to start off with someone that you probably know, and possibly some of you love, probably some of you potentially don't love. And that's Mr. Roy Hare. Roy, can you come up here and I'll get your slides up and we can kick off.
5. Let's go. There you go.
Thank you, Roy. Okay.
I'm a bit nervous. I'm not quite sure how I follow that, but I'll try. Before I start, I'd like to thank Fiona for that address. I think it was just what was needed today. And my personal thanks also to Dumfries House and the staff here, who have been absolutely excellent and supportive to us in organising the event. Personal thanks as well to Nick Hill for organising and comparing the day, probably against his better judgment, I should say, but I hope he gets a lot out of it today anyway. Also thanks to my team and to all of you for coming along, and of course a big thanks to the companies who are here today as well supporting the event. Please visit them at their stalls. I think they've got a lot of interesting things to say. Okay. Oh, that's working. I've been asked to put today's event into context for the council in particular, although there's other partners here as well. I'll put it into context. I think I'll try to at a national level, a local level. I'll tell you a wee bit about how the event came about, and then reflect on some of the ways and some of the ways we might affect change and some of the challenges we have going ahead as well. I can't give you any answers today, but that's what today's about. I hope to give you some food for thought, and I think the other speakers will be the same. I'm sorry, I should actually thank them for coming along as well. It's very much appreciated. So for a lot of years I've been attending events a wee bit like this at a national level, around about ICT supported change, things like channel shift, e-government conferences, seminars, unconferences like today, hosted by Nick and other people. But the events I've been to have tended to be around customer service and IT, and they haven't really been attended by too many representatives from other service departments in the council. And the recent one in Glasgow was coming up, and myself and my team thought, well, you know, we really should bring this kind of these ideas that have inspired us at some of these events to a wider audience within the council and the local partners that we have here, hence today. I have to say though, to start with, digital is not about technology. A lot of it is about technology, but it's not what really the thrust of digital is about. It uses ICT, but it's not an ICT topic in itself. It's also not just about cost cutting. We all know we have to make changes, as the Chief Exec outlined. But how do we make those savings and still maintain service delivery? The current thinking in the world is that digital transformation can help do that. It offers a light at the end of the tunnel. So I hope today's event kickstarts those thoughts. Such events based in digital transformation are becoming more common throughout the UK right at the moment for that reason. There's one I found which is happening tomorrow in York, for example. And the reason I threw this on up is because I like the strap line at the bottom. You probably can't see it there. It says, "The world can't wait for government." I think it probably can, but it's a nice double meaning in that, which I liked. So for over 20 years in East Ayrshire, I've been working not just in IT, but in e-government, modernising government, transformational government, digitising government. And honestly, at a national level and at a local level probably, we haven't really achieved what we really could and maybe should have. But that's not just East Ayrshire, it's everywhere in the world. I think there's reasons for that. One being the technology perhaps wasn't ready. I think there's structural reasons as well, probably why that, and that will become clear later in my talk. There's a guy called Paul Taylor who did this slide. He's a blogger, and he says that talk of digital transformation is rubbish. It hasn't happened, nothing has changed. We're delivering the same services we did in 1965, but now we've got shiny websites and customer portals. And it's a kind of cynical way to look at it. I think things are definitely changing now. I think things have been like that over the past 20 years, but now there's opportunities to change. For example, in Fife, this is just one of the new customer contact centres I threw up there just as an example. Lynn Harvey in Fife was telling me how she refers them to CRM systems, which you've probably heard of, customer relationship management systems. She refers to them now as a behaviour rather than a system, so that when all council services come together and recognise the need to record contact, and then make that contact available across the board with a unified view of the customer, so that a customer service agent can tell at a glance when someone has outstanding issues in school clothing grants, maybe they've reported a pothole, their bin hasn't been lifted, there's housing repairs issues. All that is in a unified view. And the customer service agents maybe can also see complaints that are outstanding as well. The understanding and willingness to join up becomes a behaviour within the council. And I think that's probably a nice way of putting the thrust of what I'm saying today. It's not about IT systems, it's how we behave within the council. In terms of CRMs then, we've just participated in the procurement exercise along with Scotland Excel and a group of other councils in Scotland to specify and tender for a new CRM system, or as I've been called today, customer experience platforms, which is a new one. I can't say too much about that today, particularly with the suppliers in the room, because the result will be announced tomorrow. Also at the national level, there's a new initiative, which is the Local Government Digital Partnership. This is a new service that's been set up. An agreement was presented at SOLAS on April the 16th, and it's been signed by 25 councils, us being one. There's going to be a central programme office of some kind with a new role, Chief Digital Officer for Scotland. East Ayrshire is going to be expected to play a full part in the participation, as are the other councils. I don't know if that participation will just involve IT. It could be that some of you in the room will become involved in some of those projects going forward at the national level. They want every council to be a digital council by 2020. Quite what that means is yet to be fleshed out. No doubt the Chief Digital Officer will do that in time. It does mean we have to deliver better outcomes for citizens, however. So what's digital transformation? Well, I'm not really sure, as I say, how to define it concisely, although it does involve a lot of the topics you'll see in the slides today and hear from the presenters, and a lot of the topics we talk about, hopefully this afternoon. A lot about technology, but it's not really a technology subject. But I think a lot of it has been about the rise of mobile computing. And I think that will drive many digitisation projects, both in the council and the wider world. I think this is an interesting slide. If you look at the blue triangle, that is the rise in mobile computing subscriptions, which has outpaced the number of people on the planet now in just a few short years compared to the traditional telephony. So digital transformation is more of a concept than a thing. It's an idea, it's not a project or a programme of work. The Chief sent me a book to read. Thank you, Fiona, for that. After I ceased cursing her, I did read it. I can recommend it actually. It's actually a good book and it's an easy read and it's not about IT. And the authors took a full book to explain what digital transformation is. So I can't do it here, but I think during the course of the day we'll all get a good idea. There's a few recommendations from the summary of the book if you want to cut to the chase, and I'll tell you what some of those are. Develop integrated strategies, not IT strategies. Use lean thinking. Move to horizontal rather than vertical organisations. And remain an elastic organisation. I'm a bit lost. But despite the geek speak, I think what the book says, the main thrust of its argument, I agree with. And the authors pull no punches actually in the challenges that are ahead in digital transformation. I do have one quibble with it. They do wax lyrical about a lot of the companies that have come up, the things like Facebook, TripAdvisor, Uber, Google, and they say that these are like small speedboats outmanoeuvring some of the big traditional IT companies like IBM, etc., and Microsoft. But what they don't mention is that these new companies have been startups. You know, they haven't outmanoeuvred anybody essentially. What they've done is started from a blank sheet of paper and built their services up around about their customers. Right? Whereas the big companies have been like the big tankers in the ocean, if you like, and finding it hard to turn. And you can imagine what a council is like in that paradigm. There's some principles I think it's worth mentioning when it comes to how we approach digital in the council. I think we should put people at the heart of everything we do, which this council does, I think. We should put digital first in all our development projects. Absolutely everything we're talking about, think of digital. I think we should consider mobile as a primary channel going forward. It's becoming the new website as 15 years ago. And we should try things. Don't be afraid to fail and be agile. Try things out. The ideas around digital are probably familiar to you. I think they're the same ideas as we've heard about before in terms of design thinking, the Vanguard method, customer first, putting people first, customer experience, CX, government as a platform. You can Google some of these, I'll talk about some of them later on. And I imagine sometimes the ideas we discussed today might be hard to accept in some cases, because it does involve a fundamental transformation in how we're organised. And I think that some of the executives here today, if they were here this afternoon, might find it difficult to hear some of the things people are talking about. I shouldn't say this, but somebody said to me when I was making up the slides and talking about the presentation, somebody said to me, you better watch what you say up there, you're going to get your boys to play with. I think it's what they meant was it's courageous to speak truth to power. But I think it's also courageous for all of us to talk together and openly about change, because it's a difficult thing to do. And sometimes I think it's easy to spot the faults in somebody else rather than yourself. But I think we have to start that conversation now. Too often in the past, I think we've lost the will to change because objections have arisen. Quite rational, understandable, reasonable objections that we all agree with. But we haven't put the effort and the time and the effort into overcoming those objections. That's probably the journey we have to start now. It's difficult just to try something and accept it if it fails. But one of the key ideas in digital thinking is accepting failure. And one thing I think we need to do better in the council is find a better way of having conversations about these things. Now, I think that taking months to develop business cases and then feeding that up through the harrowing process of CMT and cabinet, etc., while there's a definite need to continue proper governance and scrutiny, I think there's an opportunity as well to try some things out in an agile manner and just see if it works. And heads of service maybe could be empowered just to try things out. But perhaps we can learn some lessons in this from social media. And this is my nice wee segue. Hey, there's one example of a social media type tool we're launching today. Based in the notion of ideation, it's crowdsourcing ideas within the council. It allows anyone with access to the corporate intranet to submit an idea and then have that idea peer reviewed. Right? And they can do it anonymously if they want. People vote in the idea, they vote it up or down, and the ones that are best theoretically bubble to the top, and we're calling it the bubble chamber for that reason. We'll see how it goes. Right? It's going to be a corporate tool that's out there. And hopefully it will refresh the ideas for change that we've had for some years. I hope everyone treats it responsibly, and I hope managers throughout the council treat it with understanding, because people are going to post things that we're not going to like. You know, they're going to suggest things there that we think are cutting across our managerial structures. I think we just have to treat it with understanding. We'll try it. If it works, it works. If it fails, well, at least we've tried. I think we all want to look back in our careers and think, well, at least I tried. So, if you want a quick look at the bubble chamber today, Craig McGilvery, wherever he is, we'll give you a quick look at the break. I don't know how we're going to try in East Ayrshire, how Transformation Strategy 2 will work, so I've just kind of made this up from my own understanding. I'm guessing the Transformation Board will sit at the top somewhere, and there might be a number of projects or work streams underneath that for them to coordinate. The one I'm concerned about is a Customer Contact Project Board, and you know I've asked for nominations for this one. It's not certain yet in my own mind even how this is going to work, but I think there'll be things like the Channel Shift Group below that, reporting up through the Customer Contact Project Board to the Transformation Board. There will be other groups as well, for example the Payments Channel Shift Group, which Robin Baker has offered to lead with. I'm very happy about that. There might be other short-lived groups as well. There's an opportunity, I think, for agile sprints, where we can go away and try to work things out, or quick turnaround analysis of particular areas where we can see an opportunity for channel shift or to make savings or improvements. Speaking to several colleagues recently, I think there's a need for some additional means of coordination without just going up to the Transformation Board. I think there needs to be something in the middle, something like a change team or a programme office to coordinate in the middle there. I don't know how that will happen, and I think discussions probably have taken place already at a senior level that I'm not aware of, but I think coordination of all these projects we come up with is something we have to give more thought to. In terms of my team, we bring together the ICT systems and the customer services. We aim to provide the building block IT systems and the front office capacity, therefore, to support all of you in the changes in your service improvement plans. As part of the developing customer service strategy, we are trying to establish a principle that the customer services team should be the default point of contact for people with the council. And the way I see my team's place in this is supporting change. Now, we are not here to change the council, we are here to support you and the changes you need to make. We can't tell you how best to deliver your services. You're the experts in that. We can't tell you how to make efficiencies, but we can point the way in terms of digital. As we develop new ways of working, I hope you will look towards the customer services team to help move your contact from the back office to the front office, so the people we serve, as the Chief Exec says, get the best service we possibly can offer them, and they can get resolution across a number of service areas at first point of contact. That in turn will reduce failure demand, which should make savings. To allow savings and better services, we want to reduce customer contact as much as possible. And Eddie Fraser was telling me just earlier that there's a stat where 2% of the people in terms of health and social services are using 50%, if I get this right, Eddie, whatever you are, 50% of the budget and taking up 70% of the hospital beds. So if we can target, for example, that 2%, target's probably the wrong word, but if we can engage that 2% and have some early intervention there, that reduces the contact with the council and other organisations later on, and it reduces the failure demand, obviously it'll be cheaper. But customer contact costs money. I mean, we like our people, we love them, but we don't want to contact them too much. I think the idea of channel shift now, for that reason, is moving into channel shove. So that it's a radical idea. Services are sometimes only delivered online, not just face-to-face or by telephones or more expensive channels. A lot of organisations are moving towards channel shove now. But of course, as the Chief Exec said, to move towards contact online, you need to provide the best online services. This is just a nice example from Peterborough's website that I just liked. I think I like it because it's nice and clean and black and white, and it's not interfering with your eyes in any way. It just seemed very clear and simple. But web design is a subjective topic, and we want to learn from the best examples out there. I think we must remember that my folk and your folk, when we're moving towards the online world, will have to deal with the digital team in PPP that Lynn has, because they're the experts in this now. But I think Lynn would recognise when I'm saying that one of the frequent requests we get is to have apps. Now, every council service wants an app, right? And we've been resisting this. There's a bit of a buzz out there in the world about apps, but the latest thinking in the digital world, I think, that I'm hearing, is that a responsive website, or a website that looks like an app and feels like an app, is the way forward. It's easier for us to maintain and manage. And the users sometimes don't even know they're using a website. They should be able to just use it on their mobile phone. And that's the kind of strategy we're trying to develop in the council. Another one, as the Chief mentioned earlier, is web chat, which I think we could get great benefit from. A lot of councils have web chat systems in now, and a customer service agent with the appropriate tools can deal with 3 or 4 conversations at once. It's obviously a saving there, rather than being tied up in a telephone. So I'll be forming the project board after this event. I know some of you have been nominated to sit on the board. One of the points of the remit for the board is to provide a simple methodology for helping managers to adopt change within the council. And I wanted to highlight this. The primary method we're proposing is called Customer Journey Mapping, CJM. And I hope that with the help of ODE and the Ailey's team, that we can roll this concept out to as many managers in the council as possible. I think it's very important. I'm convinced that CJM will allow us to transact our business looking from the outside in, from the customer's point of view. Now, it sounds a bit silly for a methodology, because what you do is you sort of sit down with a customer, or you play act as a customer, and you go through a transactional process with the customer from their view, and you draw smiley faces or sad faces as you go along. It's like kids at the school or something, you know, but once you actually take the time to sit down and go through that, because we all think we know it, but once you sit down and go through those steps, the penny drops, and you do get a different view, and I think that's a powerful tool. Now, I've talked to April Masson recently, and I know she's just begun conversations with council services, offering support in terms of the 3-stage change methodology, being promoted by the Scottish Government. It's based on improvement science. That's a very interesting approach, and I definitely welcome the work that April's doing there. What I think, though, because the expectation these days, as she would tell you, is the key to effective change, is to have these agile cycles. The short cycle, fail fast and then start again. And that should mean we should change faster than we previously could. But CJM is a type of consultation, and I think that using the customer journey mapping at the start of that business improvement process, before moving on to your improvement processes themselves, lets you identify the outcomes that you want to achieve, looking from the outside in. Jerry McGovern, who's a well-known customer service, web, digital transformation guru, summed it up. I think he said we need flexible, adaptable, nimble structures today, ones that are constantly evolving based on feedback from the environment. It used to be customers lived in a world of organisations. Now organisations live in a world of customers. Transformation will come from shifting the thinking from service out to customer in, and that's what digital really is all about. I mentioned Fife earlier, and this is an example which I hope they forgive me for throwing up here. This is classic service out thinking rather than customer in. What had happened was one crew had went round, found some fly tipping, put a label on it, and left it for another crew to pick up. It didn't go down well on social media, and that's the world we're living in now. Social media and sort of bureaucratic rules don't really mix. In fact, as a result of some of the challenges around here, Fife have formed now an escalation and resolution team, and they're centralising their complaints, the way they deal with complaints, but they're taking a different approach. Instead of just dealing with the complaints themselves, they're having a look at council policy and procedure as well, and they're seeing if there's any changes in council policy that could be made to reduce the complaints going forward. And I think that's an interesting approach as well. It doesn't happen all too often because we're all too busy. Another thing we have to do is find out what our customers want. Not to say they're always right, but we have to consult in order to support our strategic development. So to advance our customer insight project, what we've done is we've got GovMetric tools in place now. And these allow you in real time across a number of different channels to measure customer satisfaction. So you can see fairly immediately if any changes you've made against the baseline have improved satisfaction or otherwise. There's an opportunity for other services to use this tool as well. And if you want to see what GovMetric's like, Thomas, who's standing up at the back there, has a few tablets and he can show you today. Another aspect of the work we have to do, and I think we all have to do, is analyse the services we provide to look for opportunities to channel shift, to make savings and to do things more efficiently. That's just an example I'm throwing up of some work we did with very complicated spreadsheets back in 2005-06, where we had to report our electronic service delivery progress to the Scottish Government. It's a bit of a thankless task, and it relies on all services participating. And I know finance, with the finance tracker, are getting involved in this. But I think everyone has to get involved because these are your savings, they're your processes, they're your efficiencies, and everyone has to get involved in this finance tracker and say, look for the opportunities to move things online. Digital transformation, I say, it's not a project. It's not a quick fix. We can't just take the injection and hope we can get better. It's not a white elephant either. It is happening out there, as Nick said earlier, and we really should do it, approach it right and get it right. It's a way of thinking more than anything. So I don't think we should embark on a digital transformation work stream as a separate entity. Instead, we must embed digital thinking into every process and every improvement, every project we have. But I think we all recognise some of the negatives as well in this diagram. How can we be expected to make real changes when we're up against this? But I think all of these are culture-originated pressures. There's probably things we can do about all these. So we have to change ourselves and change the culture before we can really change the council. There's a guy called Carol Haggerty I picked up from this, who's a public sector blogger. He's got very sour things to say about leadership in the sector. I've put some mild quotes up here, along with some slides. You can go away and look at these because the slides will be passed round. I'm not sure if we're up yet for a fundamental change in the way we do things in the council. I suspect a lot of you are sitting out there thinking, fundamental change? I don't think so. But today is the start of a conversation, a start of that change. I think we can learn a lot of lessons from elsewhere and from some of the people who are here today. We have to try, and there has to be a practical way forward. So I've told you about the background to today, I've told you a wee bit the national picture, I've told you some of how my understanding of what's happening in East Ayrshire, and some of the opinions and the barriers, and some of the negatives as well as the positives. I'm in the final third, you'll be glad to hear, that hopefully I can be a wee bit more positive now, and I've got one suggestion as well for something we might try. For example, against the background of the traditional structural challenges that I've mentioned, there isn't the concept in IT of a hackathon, which is like a time out from the frenzy. A hackathon originated as a means for software development to be done very quickly. So they'd get a whole load of geeks and stick them in a room with enough pizza and coke and tell them to go and solve a problem. You know, and they'd be holed up there. And that's some young people doing it with their post-it notes and things on their computers. The hackathons have moved into other areas as well, into some very strange areas, I think, with the looks of some of these things. And they're used in all sorts, not just IT anymore. The NHS down south, went through a programme just recently, you've probably heard about this, which they combined transformation and hackathon and came up with a transformathon. So it was a global event that they had online, involved thousands of participants across the world. I think that the size of the event that they had and all the ideas they had to discuss, the number of speakers and things, it kind of ran away with itself a wee bit probably, but it's an amazing idea. And I think it's a very bold idea. But note the times. I want to show you the times of the event, 4 p.m. to 4 p.m. That's very common. And you've probably heard this before. And one of the hashtag for today is EADT Camp, East Ayrshire Digital Transformation Camp. And there's this idea of camps out there, which you might have heard of. And these things generally are where people in the public sector are giving up their own time, their weekends, to go away and try to redesign services. Now, I've been to one or two of these, and you go on a Saturday, and you sit down, you dress down, and just go. You have sessions like this, and it's kind of like an unconference. I think that's what they tried to recreate there in the Transformers film. So in East Ayrshire, I think one positive idea we could, I could suggest it, is I think we could have hackathon weeks or something similar. I think we accept generally where our staff go on holiday for a week or 2 weeks and they're just not there. So couldn't we just take some staff from different service areas, put them together in a room and say, redesign a council service from the ground up, looking from the outside in, from the customer's point of view, and throw away the traditional wisdom and just redesign it and see what happens. I think it'd be interesting to try. Just as an aside, I want to finish up with something that's nothing to do with digital transformation, but it's a bit of fun. I'm doing the QI bit here, it's Stephen Fry. The other night when I was doing these slides, I was watching a TV programme about how Chicago built up its sewerage system. It's a fascinating story. There was a guy called Ellis Chesborough who was employed by the city of Chicago back in the 19th century, and the city was absolutely rank. You know, it was such a low-lying city. It was about the same level as Lake Michigan, so there was no drainage. And these are the days of horses and carts and things, and it was almost the days of people throwing things out their window. But so the streets were filling up, and there was nowhere for them to drain to. And he employed a guy called George Pullman. This was before he made his fortune with the Pullman sleeping cars and things like that. He was a young engineer at the time, and together they devised a plan to lift the whole city up. This wasn't wooden shacks, it was big stone buildings. They lifted the whole city up between 4 and 14 feet. And there's an example of how they did it. That's a place called the Briggs Hotel. The guys at the bottom, you see, are using screw jacks to lift up that whole building, the same as you do to change a tyre in a car. But they lifted everything up high enough to put the drainage pipes in place and a new sewerage system underneath. And they did it with the entire city. Funnily enough, in this case, they did it with people still in the hotel. You see them up there on the balcony watching it. And people were coming and going about their business just as if nothing was happening. Anyway, that was a big success. It was a bold move and a big success. And after that, every other American city, they led the way. Every American city then installed new sewerage systems. Now, that's another example. That's where they lifted a whole city block up together. I think it's interesting because you can see the difference in the height from one end to the other there. They also moved buildings. There's a contemporary account of a guy who wrote in his journal. He was staying in the city at the time, and he said, every time I come out of my room, I have to get stopped in my tracks to allow a building to cross the street. It was extraordinary what they did. But that was an amazing transformation using the technology at the time. You don't need me to tell you that change can be difficult, but other places have done effective changes in terms of digital. And I think today is mostly about starting that conversation locally. There's no rights and wrongs, and I hope you all feel free to speak your mind in the real meat of today, which is the sessions this afternoon. We're going to hear various ideas from changing things, and I think it's important for us to identify not just the barriers here to change things, but have a positive outlook about how we might go about overcoming those barriers. Also identify maybe what support mechanisms we need to put in place within the council to overcome those challenges. And maybe we can start to consider, on a smaller scale than Chicago probably, how we can rip up the accepted wisdom and change how services are delivered. And I had a go at defining digital transformation, and I thought we should define it as having a committed go at hacking together some new ways from a blank sheet of paper, putting people first, supported by technology, and that was probably about as concise a definition as I could come up with. But I think that the principles that we've got up on the screen here, which are probably just off the side of the screen unfortunately, I think they'll help us as we go ahead. So that's kind of all from me. Thanks for listening. I know the next several speeches, I've seen their slides and they're very professional compared to mine. So I hope you enjoy the day. I hope I've put some context around the event, why we're here, and I hope you get what you want from the day as well. But remember, what you get from this being an unconference, you get out of it what you put in. It's all about the conversations we'll have this afternoon. Now hand over to Nick.